So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it's just past midnight on Tuesday. What is today? Tuesday, October the 22nd. And guys, we're starting a couple minutes early because we got to do a sound check here for Cheyenne. So let's get Cheyenne in the box there. Hey, Brian. Hey, Pugga Mahone. Robert Chapman. Always a pleasure to see you, Mr. Chapman. There's Bobby, Anthony, Darlene. Hey, Chris Carter, how you doing? Tisno's here. I love it when Croatia's in the house. You're hearing me okay? And Cheyenne, I sent you an invite. Did you see that? Hey, Mel. Hey, Kevin. Effin' hell. How you doing, Whit? Hey, Herb. Brian Kornbaugh is here. What's up, Brian? Richard Prexis. Let me try this again. So I am very pleased to say we have a fellow on tonight, Ben Dusing, and we're going to have the opportunity to speak with him. And I think that it's important because there's a lot of talk about what's happening in Kherson right now. Now, everybody here knows that Kherson was the only regional capital occupied by the occupation forces during this war. And they lost it. They gave it up. And it has been revealed. I guess that some of this information was public earlier, but it's really Bob Woodward's book, War, due out later this month, if I'm not mistaken. That brought to the fore that the Biden administration was convinced that rather than lose Kherson, the Russians intended to use a tactical nuclear weapon, a battlefield nuclear weapon, against the Ukrainians in Kherson. And that belief, now we don't know if it's true, right? Certainly, United States intelligence tracks these weapons. And if they saw that the Russians were moving one out of storage, they could well have believed that it wasn't a bluff. And that has been retarding our response to this invasion ever since. I think so. I think that it's obvious. Now, again, we don't know whether or not Putin really intended to use a battlefield nuke in September 22. But we do know that the Biden administration was convinced that they were going to. We know that Lloyd Austin had a conversation with Sergei Shoigu around this very issue. We know that 2 weeks later, after the phone call with Shoigu, November 4th, Xi Jinping publicly warns Moscow not to use a nuke in Ukraine. 2 weeks after that, Narendra Modi of India, the world's largest democracy, pulls out of the 22nd annual Russia-India conference. And so whether Russia was bluffing, as they often do, or whether they intended to use a nuke, we don't really know, but we do know that it appears that major governments of the world believed it and took action to draw a line in the sand. Now, this has come up lately because, of course, Ukraine is now the only non-nuclear nation in the world to fight not one, but two nuclear powers, because the North Koreans have entered the war, right? It's very clear that the North Koreans have entered the war, and we have some updates on the North Korean involvement in the war. But before we get to that, again, we're going to do an interview kind of style format with Ben Dusing, who is in Kherson. And one of the things that we hear about Kherson is that the Russians are taking novice drone operators. And it appears that for training exercises, they are hunting civilians in Kherson, literally blowing up grandmothers standing at bus stops and 34-year-old guys on mopeds, hunting them down for their target practice. And so the very first question I want to put to Ben, a resident of Kherson, is what's happening with drones? And I'd like to hear it from somebody who's living with it every day. Ben is a foreigner. Foreigners can't really travel to Kherson, but he got himself residence there. And he operates a humanitarian charity in Kherson. So we'll be hearing from him in just a little bit. Let's take a look at the news. Today is, for me, it's just past midnight on Tuesday, October 22nd. So that makes this the news for Monday, October the 21st, 2024, day 972 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. Last night, we had a real loud night here. I did another video where you could hear one of the two-cycle engines of these Shahed drones going right over the apartment complex here. And there was a good question from somebody, why isn't air defense working if that's right in downtown Kyiv? And I did not have a good answer. It was a loud night. Air defense was going for 4 or 5 hours, on and off, on and off. That's because the Russians sent 116 drones. 59 of them were shot down, and another 45 were, according to the MOD, lost. Now, we don't really know what lost means. Were they just disabled with electronic warfare? Were they crashed with electronic warfare? Were they taken over and redirected using electronic warfare? I don't know that they can do that. But just suppose that that drone going over the house was actually no longer under the control of the Russians. I don't know that to be true. Maybe that drone going over the house was one of the 50% of drones that the Ukrainian MOD today is saying are decoys. That they aren't actually attack drones. They're just cheap drones with a cheap engine made out of plywood and rubber. And they're just meant to exhaust air defense. Is it possible that the radar operators here in Ukraine have managed to identify those and they're not wasting air defense trying to take them out? I don't know the answer to that. I know that they are loaded with something that gives them a larger radar return, so they appear bigger than they are. And they're built to the same specifications as the Shaheds. So visual sight, they look just like a Shahed, but the radar signature is apparently different. For its part, Russia says that Saturday night, Sunday night, 110 drones were intercepted. 110 Ukrainian drones going into Russia. Russia sent 116 drones at Ukraine last night, but the night before that, Russia got its fair share. 43 of them were identified over the Kursk region. And then we know that there were some hits in Kursk, despite the fact that, that was in Lipetsk. I'll come to that in a second. Moving on to South Korea. I finally looked it up. The average height of a South Korean man is 5'7" for the Americans, or 170 centimeters for everybody else. The average height of a North Korean man because of chronic malnutrition and protein deficiency in utero is 5'2". It's a full 5-inch difference on average, or 157 centimeters. That's the kind of difference between the South Koreans and the North Koreans, just in terms of overall health and length of bone. One of the big stories last week, or on Friday rather, was that 18 of the North Koreans were said to have gone AWOL, were said to have deserted, and that the Russians were hunting for them. Now, that story has changed quite a bit now. All of the North Koreans that were in that group have been returned to their units and are on the front line, somewhere in the vicinity of the Kursk nuclear power plant today, is what we're being told from Ukrainian intelligence. Now, it's unclear to me. Apparently what happened was that a North Korean unit was placed in a defensive position with no food and no water and left there with no word from command for several days. Finally, some of them became frustrated with this and they decided to walk to try to find Russian command and get some food and water. Like, what happened? Did you forget about us? It is very unclear to me whether it was the group that went looking for Russian command or the group that stayed to starve that actually was accused of going AWOL. It's also unclear where they were found. Now, there is a rumor going around. I hesitate to say it because it is just a rumor. But there is a rumor going around that the 18 guys that were AWOL were found living in a small Russian rural settlement where they had basically been playing house for 3 days. The locals found them to be very helpful, good workers, and were happy to feed them. They were very happy to be fed. And they might have stayed there and had a lot of beautiful Korean babies if they hadn't been found by the FSB. Anyway, hey, Steve-O, how you doing? So Ukraine is now, it is worth pointing out that Ukraine is now the only non-nuclear state to officially be engaged in a large-scale conflict with not one but two nuclear powers. That is the threat that we are looking at. And South Korea is having none of it. They are not happy about this at all. Seoul issued a memoranda to Pyongyang, filing a grievance and demanding the immediate repatriation of any North Korean troops that had been sent to Russia. Now, whether or not I do not have at this time Pyongyang's response to these demands by South Korea. But South Korea is making these demands. It is worth pointing out that South Korea, New Zealand, Australia, and Japan, their defense ministers were all recently invited to a meeting of NATO, to the NATO defense ministers meeting in Brussels. That is the first time in history that the representatives of our, Pacific Alliance partners were ever invited to NATO. Additionally, it is my understanding that South Korea has now been granted access to the BICES software, BICES. Now, PT, I don't know if you know what this software is, but if you do, chat it out for everybody. Because let me tell you, I read the official description of what BICES is intended to do for folks, and I didn't understand. I read it 3 times, and I couldn't tell you, right, because I'm not a military person. I don't have a military background. And there seemed to be a lot of doublespeak in there. It's short for, BICES stands for Battlefield Information Collection and Exploitation. This is a common NATO software core to many parts of NATO's mission. Its use is exclusively for NATO. Access to it has been extended to the South Koreans. Now, that should tell you that NATO sees the North Korean as a threat, and they are. North Korea has blown the roads, the railroads, and the bridges to South Korea. They've staffed it with more military personnel and artillery than has ever been there since the ceasefire in 1953. North Korea, Kim Jong-un, issued a directive, or rather, pardon me, Kim Jong-un claimed that in 1 week, 1.4 million patriotic North Koreans had signed up for service in the armed forces. Because there's a lot of volunteering going on in North Korea. Now, I have some information here. Oh, it's worth mentioning, too, that Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, requested a call with the South Korean president, and that the two of them did have that call today. So South Korea and NATO are very closely aligning right now. I got some information on the Special Operations Forces of North Korea. So North Korea has sent troops to Ukraine, right? We think maybe there's 15 to 1,600 in the temporarily occupied territories, another 15 to 1,600 up in the Kursk region, Bryansk region. We think that there are likely as many as 12,000 currently at 4 training centers out by Vladivostok in the Far East. This is a significant commitment of men and materiel from the North Korean government to the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine. And clearly it enables it. Now, it appears that the troops that have been sent to Russia are from North Korea's Special Operations Forces. Now, this should not be confused with special forces in the U.S. Or in Great Britain or any NATO country. According to what I have, there's over 200,000 North Koreans in these special forces, so I'm not sure how special they are. They also have the best equipment available. And the only thing is, you're in North Korea. What's available there is not what's available in the rest of the world, right? So, huge division with the best equipment available, formed in the mid-'60s. The big thing that they are known for is their failed attempt to storm the Blue House, which is South Korea's White House. They have a Blue House. We have a White House. In 1968, 31 Special Operations Forces soldiers of North Korea stormed the South Korean Blue House. 29 of them were unalived outright as part of the operation. It was apparently a huge disaster and a catastrophe. And look, North Korea doesn't interact with the rest of the world. It's a hermetically sealed cult of personality nightmare where the state owns the people in it and pursues a policy of intentional famine to keep their people starving so they won't revolt. This is insanity. Insanity of the worst order, in my opinion. Today, the Special Operations Forces of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has 12 light infantry brigades, 3 recon units, 3 airborne units, 3 sniper units, and again consists of about 200,000 people. Now, I mean, one shudders at the notion that it's possible that North Korea could commit all of them or a large number of them to Russia's war against Ukraine. But it's not impossible. So we're waiting on some kind of unified response from the West to this clear escalation. Now, on the battlefield, Ukraine hit a Buk M3 air defense system in the east. These are $40 to $50 million a piece. Here's the thing. They hit it with a domestically produced Baba Yaga drone. Took it right out. Those cost about $25,000. So the Ukrainians are using $25,000 drones to take out $40 to $50 million pieces of air defense tech. This is one of the ways that Ukraine is going to win this war. Ingenuity, efficiency, spending a lot less money to destroy things that are worth so much more. It's amazing. There were protests, pro-EU protests in Georgia over the past weekend, just ahead of the elections that are coming up this Saturday. The protests were rallies for pro-EU voters. There was an appeal to the West. Don't forget about us. We are still here. We may be under the thumb of Russia today, but we all hope, our fondest hope for the Georgians is that they vote out those Dream Party Putin puppets that have their country in a vice. That's our fondest hope. The president was there, but the president is very unpopular with the Dream Party. She vetoed the anti-gay, foreign agents bill that their Congress then passed again, overriding her veto. Moldova, somebody's saying down there, Moldova voted for the EU by the narrowest of margins. Now look, the thinking in political circles was that they would carry this thing easily. They were predicting by like a 7 to 8 point lead, right? The final vote count, as I understand it, was 50.4 to 49.6. 50.4 to 49.6. It was a razor-thin margin. However, about 1.5 million people voted in this election. We know that the Russians paid $15 million to 130,000 Moldovans for their vote. 130,000. That's 8.6%. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about foreign interference in an election. You can't get more foreign or interfering than paying people to vote against their own interests, which is exactly what the Russians have been doing. Okay, those 110 drones that Russia says it shot down, right, according to the governor of Lipsk, all the drones were taken out, but some debris fell on the territory of the Lipetsk 2 air base, about 140 miles, 250 kilometers northeast of Kyiv. That is where they keep the Su-34s and 5s and some MiG-31s. Remember, it's the MiG-31s that launched the Kinzhal missiles. According to the HUR, this was one of their attacks, caused fire on the territory and secondary explosions. Likely because the Su-34s and 35s are there, there was an ammo dump full of glide bombs, and that's what the secondary explosions were. Sverdlov, 300 kilometers east of Moscow, about 180 miles. This place produces glide bombs. So they store and produce glide bombs. It's a state-owned facility sanctioned by the U.S., and it was hit this weekend by Ukrainian drones as well. Marginal gains by the AFU in Kursk and marginal gains by the Russians in the Donbass. Kharkiv was again last night at 10 p.m., Sunday night at 10 p.m. The Russians launched 3 glide bombs at 3 different residential areas inside of Kharkiv. How does that make any sense to anybody? We had another Andre. Have you lost another oligarch, Andre? We had another oligarch go flying out the window. The vice president of UCAS fell out of a window in Moscow. Officials say he left a suicide note. Officials say he had late-stage cancer. A member of the FSB, was walking his dog outside the apartment when the body landed in front of him. Amazing. What a coincidence. Yeesh. This is the 12th energy executive in 2 years that fell out of a window. According to his family, he did not have cancer. He was not depressed. He was in good health. And no one expected him to commit suicide. That's according to the family. Russian pilot Dmitry Gelenkov was found dead in Bryansk. All of the information on this is coming from the Ukrainians. The Russians are mum on this. It may have been the hammer of justice again. The Ukrainians have performed targeted assassinations on those people that they believe to be guilty of war crimes against the Ukrainian people. This guy was certainly in line for a gold star for his war crimes against the Ukrainian people. He was the chief of staff of the Russian aviation squadron, pilot for the 52nd Bomber Regiment, the very bombers, the Tu-95s and Tu-22s, that were responsible for things like hitting the theater in Mariupol. Now, that's just an example, right? Large-scale attacks against Ukrainian civilians, and he's one of those guys. And he was found with his head apparently struck repeatedly with what may have been a hammer. So now the G7 is an economic coalition, right, of the largest economies in the world, that get together and to make sure that they stay the largest economies in the world, I'm sure. What they are not is a defensive alliance, not on paper anyway. And for the first time ever, the defense ministers of the G7 had a meeting. They did not say much after this meeting, except they offered their unwavering support for Ukraine, repeated that it was irreversible that Ukraine would join NATO and the EU. They condemned the Russians for creating an environment of confrontation and destabilization on a global scale. They chided the Russians for hybrid warfare and irresponsible nuclear rhetoric. So again, not a defensive alliance, principally economic in its nature. The G7 defense ministers, however, are clearly concerned about, I think, the North Korean escalation. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, make no mistake. Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense for the United States, arrived in Kyiv today, while the French defense minister was just on his way out of town. And he expressed his support for the victory plan. There was an armored column destroyed in the Kharkov direction. That was a Russian armored column. They're using large-scale armored attacks again, and they're getting exactly the same results that they have for the last 2.5 years. Russians raised the North Korean and Russian flags on a terracon over a captured Ukrainian village in Donetsk. So this is the first time that we have seen the North Korean flag raised over conquered Ukrainian territory. The idea that a second nuclear power has committed its state troops to the fight in Ukraine to bear Putin's water is unlike anything else that's happened in this conflict. The Ukrainians have a neat new anti-drone drone specifically designed to take out the Shaheds. It's called the Sting, and it can provide for early interception and execution. Russia lost another IL-76. The IL-76s are those big cargo planes, right? Like our C-130s. They go for $50 million. We think the Russians had 120 of them in 2006, but they are down probably to about 110 right now, with maybe half of those actually flight-worthy. This was in Sudan, near Darfur, where the Russian-supported rebels, the Rapid Support Forces, regularly are engaged with Sudanese regular army. Okay, it is just about 12:30, so I want to go to Ben Dusing here in just a second. Real quick. We are seeing unprecedented levels of brutal frontline activity. Yesterday saw what I believe to be was the largest single-day loss of Russian troops on the battlefield. This is KIA, WIA, 1,710. 1,710 in one day. That's almost double the average daily losses, say, in 2022. Double them. Finally, there was a story. We saw some video of a couple of guys that went AWOL from their unit, a couple of Russians, right, who said their commander was a drunk and he was going to get everybody killed, and they were taken off. Well, these guys now are in hiding somewhere, maybe in the occupied territories, it's unclear. But they're in hiding, and they're making rap videos about how the war is all a big lie and a big grift. They're making rap videos where they wish that their commander would die of cirrhosis of the liver. I was looking at it, and, I was thinking about the Czech Republic, because in 1968, the communists took over Czechoslovakia, right? And the revolution, the Velvet Revolution inside a Czech Republic that freed them from that communist rule was executed by a bunch of poets and playwrights and musicians. And this kind of thing, a catchy rap song, now I can't say if it's any good, right? But a catchy song that tells the truth about a bad situation might be just what the Russian people need. Yeah, CBL, I don't know if they're any good, man. I don't know if they're any good. Anyway, so is Ben Dusing here? Is Ben here? So it had been my plan tonight, guys, to talk to this guy, Ben. He's an American down in Kherson. He's technically a Kherson resident. And he's got something he calls the free store. And I wanted to talk about life in Kherson and how things are going down there. Let me just check. If he's not here, let me just check my Telegram. Sorry about this, guys. Please stand by. We may be experiencing technical difficulties. Yeah, I don't know. Hey, Howard, I think that might be it, Howard. The guy does work long hours. God knows, you guys know, there have been nights, right, where the live didn't happen. Oh, there's World Aid Runners. There he is. The live didn't happen because I just fell asleep, man. It happens, but it doesn't look like it happened here. Ben's a better person than I am. And I just sent him an invitation. No, Fitz, nobody wants to talk to you. I mean, really, have you given up your whole sweet life in Jersey to come here? I don't think so. Wow, why doesn't the thing look like that? Hey, Ben, can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Hey, everybody out there on the interwebs, can you hear Ben okay? Give me a thumbs up or two.
Should I be doing something with my camera here, Peter? Sorry, this is my first time this way.
That's entirely up to you. If you want to turn your camera on, we'll be able to see you.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, Ben, let's get started here because I'd like to give some time for the guys to be able to ask you some questions. And I have a couple questions that may take up a little bit of time here. So, the first question is we hear about 60 to 100 Russian drones target civilians in Kherson every day. What is your experience of Russian drone activity in Kherson, and how it affects everyday lives?
That is a great question. First of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate all you do. I have to say that. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Great. Yeah, so drones they've just changed the game. They've just I can't really overstate the impact, and so they're a daily occurrence. So I guess it's context is I guess important. So of course you had the occupation. It's the only big city that was occupied. So the people, that's a different category of humanitarian need, human condition. I mean, less than 1% of Ukrainians, thank God, know what that is. But unfortunately, the 400,000 pre-war population of Kherson, we're down to 50,000. But they do. So that's the first thing. Then you have, for 22 months, about 300 to 350 rounds incoming into a concentrated civilian population from just down the street. The Russians, just on the other side of the river. So,
I'm sorry. Can you say that? I'm sorry. Can you say that again? You've got how many? And then when you say rounds, I assume you mean mortars and artillery shells?
Yes, mortars, artillery, anything with a shell. Occasional tank fire. That's not every day. It's not the standard diet, but every once in a while you'll get that. So but that's indiscriminate shelling, and somehow the people learn to live with that. Somehow we've learned how to live with that. There's just little nuances to it, but against that backdrop, and people already, I mean, there's no analog for that. All of a sudden, then you have drones. And so I guess I should say too, it's important to understand what kind of drones these are. These aren't the Shahed drones, the long range. These are first person view FPV drones. And there's three types: surveillance, the ones that hold the grenades and drop them on people, and then the kamikazes. And all of a sudden, you have the front half of the city really blanketed by these drones. You can't, and so the effect of that has been to just shut down. It's just to render the population immobile. That wasn't the case with the shelling. I mean, you had to be on the lookout, especially in the front half of the city here, closest to the river. But now, I mean, you know, to go anywhere is a real big risk. Uh, so the effect of that is that people can't go anywhere, and obviously that's a real big problem. We can't help people that we were helping before. There are populations that are cut off, really, down on the riverbank, 3,000 people in Antonovka alone, which is technically a different city, but it's, you know, adjacent to Kherson. So in short, Peter, I mean, it's immobilized the population. You have no reaction time. There's no defense. There's no defense. They fly, you know, high, and you can't see them or hear them. And then all of a sudden, you know, once you see them or hear them, if they want you, they're going to get you. Yeah. So somebody had a great idea. Somebody in our office had a great idea of getting a drone finder. Now, I personally thought, I mean, to me, this was like turning on a radar detector in like a police department parking lot. But we're not in the office very frequently for long periods of time. The short version of this is that I had no idea that there were, I don't know that I wanted to know how many drones were in the sky. Last 2 Fridays ago, we had the BBC come down, and I mean, there was over 100 drones on that thing at the end of the day. So anyway, sorry for the long answer, but the short version is it's just shut down everything, and I don't know what the solution is. I don't know that anybody knows.
And Bobby asked, or kind of said, we can assume that has hurt morale in town. I mean, people have, right? I can't even imagine. It's a whole shut-in mentality, I would think.
It has. It's been brutal to see. Just to give you some idea, you know, the people that are here are people that, I mean, if you have someplace else to go, you went there a long time ago, people have endured through 9 months of the occupation, 22 months of being shelled the whole time. And the people on the riverbank are directly frontal to that. Most of them don't have power, water, or heat. I mean, I'm talking to you right now, 1 kilometer from the Dnieper River, in my apartment here, our office is next door. So we're 1 kilometer from the front. You know, those people from where we are down to the river really don't have power, water, heat. These are people that have been through holy hell. They've been through everything short of certain death. These are people that are going to endure. But for the first time, you know, we've got people at the free store who are telling us, you know, we want to get out, you know, and you have to. I mean, public transport, you have to. So yes, it's hurt morale a lot. And for the first time, you're seeing people that have been through everything, and they're just kind of waving the white flag a little bit.
Now, you were not in Kherson for the occupation, correct?
I was not. No Westerners were. No. That's correct. I certainly was not. But no Western journalist, no Western humanitarian was. So
not with the Russians there. So, so let me ask you, what was it like coming into a city recently liberated from Russian occupation? I mean, when you speak to local people, are there common threads that run through their stories, themes? What was the effect of that occupation like, and what was it like walking into it?
It's a great question, and thank you for it. So I guess I should say it wasn't the first city that I walked into, you know, that was recently liberated. But it is the only big city, right? So we kind of became, I guess, really accidental frontline humanitarians in the East. We lived in Kharkiv for 5 months and served the Kharkiv region and the Donbas, and that was running into small towns and villages that had been liberated, you know, the day before, sometimes the same day. And that was a devastating thing to see what Russian occupation was with my own eyes. I mean, I never in my life thought I'd have the experience of knocking on somebody's door and telling them that they were free. I mean, that's a hell of a thing. But I had a sense of what Russian occupation was, because in all of the towns and villages in the East,
Pardon me.
recently liberated, you saw what that was. So I really thought I was prepared for it. I mean, Kherson was just a big city that had been, and I was really wrong about that. The systemic nature of the brutality here, 27 torture chambers, spread throughout the city. One of the first things I noticed when I arrived, we were asked to come down. We could do some things. They needed those things to be done. The first thing I noticed was no one talks about the occupation. It's unspeakable. It just is conspicuous in its absence. And so that stood out. You don't talk about the occupation. You don't ask about the occupation. Nobody brings it up. What I know about the occupation, it took me about really, I feel like it was about 18 months of, it's not something you talk about. Once I had formed relationships of trust, people would start to just give me a little nugget here and there. There's no record of the occupation. The history of the occupation is the oral history of those who survived it. There are some brave souls that took some pictures and videos, but frankly, that was a really good way to get killed. So it just took a lot of time, piece by piece, a picture formed, and I felt like I finally understood. But the occupation is not a historical detail. It is the single most relevant thing to the people here now. You can't necessarily see that, but it's huge. It's the biggest thing. Those wounds are still gaping.
It's like a lot of trauma, right?
Yeah.
You suppress it. You don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So when you think about the challenges facing the citizens of Kherson, how does the free store, that's your operation, operate to assist in meeting those needs?
Thank you for the question. I sure hope we help. For us, it's real simple. Our mission is to keep alive thousands of Ukrainians that are not going to be kept alive if we don't find a way to get them basic food, basic medicine, basic hygiene, and basic warmth in the form of clothing. This was not kind of the plan. It's just the way that unfolded. We became, an organization only because there weren't any here. So in all the places further away from the war, in all of Ukraine's other big cities, which it's a very different wartime experience. Those cities are out of artillery range. They weren't occupied. This is a very dangerous place. And so those organizations are not resident here. They send people in, some people out. That's a good model to serve small towns and villages. That really doesn't work with a population of 50,000 people living directly on the front. So we just happen to be here. We gained the experience necessary to operate independently, which you need, and we just happen to be in that position. So we formed the organization out of necessity, and the free store was supposed to be a small little store to serve a targeted population, the folks in the Peribezhnaya zone, the coastal zone, directly up against the front. And then a lot of things happened, including, the people here, there's no work, okay? This is not a functioning place. There's no work for the people. If you have a job, you're the luckiest SOB alive. And so most people can't, earn the money they need to buy things. Everyone was overwhelmingly dependent on state assistance. That quietly gets rolled back over time and was in a major way in January. And all of a sudden, hundreds of people lining up at the free store, and really no place else to go. If you don't have a job, there's no state assistance. International humanitarian assistance becomes very important. All of a sudden, we find ourselves the only foreign humanitarian organization resident in the city. My plan was to recruit other organizations to come down and help us out. And then the city closed to foreigners in April. The only reason that we can be here is because we were granted lawful residency. So it is not something I like to dwell on, but we're it for thousands of Ukrainians. So what do they need? Basic food, basic medicine, basic hygiene, and basic warmth, clothing, especially now in wintertime. That's the mission. It's not pretty, it's raw, it's just to keep these people alive. So, that's kind of what we do and where we fit in. And I didn't plan on being in this situation. I don't think anybody would want to be in this situation, but we've just had to dig deep and find a way.
Now,
So
now,
yeah,
Ben, you must have a website or a Facebook group or something. Cheyenne, I know we can't pin messages when we're in the live like this, but can you do me a favor? Can you give us the website or the? Oh, there we go. PT's got it already. Thank you, PT. You're on top of shit, man. It's at World Food Runners here on the Tickety Talk, and I assume from there they can find you everywhere on the web.
it's worldaidrunners.org, worldaidrunners.org.
That's the same for the website.
Yes, sorry. It's the website is www.worldaidrunners.org. But folks can reach out to me on here. It's www.worldaidrunners.org.
Okay.
It's a skeletal presence. I have to tell you, we're here to help. I wish I had more time. It's not a lot of glitz and gloss. It's exhausting to be here, and at night I try and get that thing, looking good. But
No,
it's
good.
bare
You're not
bones.
spending money on the website.
Right, right, right.
I'm all in favor of that, brother. So let me ask you. This is a tough one here, but just when you think about the people around you, right? You're talking about folks who are cut off from aid, a city that aid is cut off from. What is beyond the capability of your organization, the Free Store, that bothers you and that you wish somebody somewhere would do something about it? What's the biggest unfilled need there?
I mean, the humanitarian need for the people of Kherson
Is
is for the
vast.
rockets. Well, it's real simple in the end. It's for the rockets to stop, and nothing's going to get better until that. You can't look. I mean, it's 350 incoming shells into a concentrated suburban or urban population every day, and now killer drones everywhere. It is not going to get better and can only get worse until that security situation changes. Once that stops, Kherson will be like the other big cities in Ukraine. Mykolaiv is a great example. When it was in artillery range, that place cleared out, the economy goes away, everything falls. As soon as the Russians get pushed back, I got stuck in traffic the other day in Mykolaiv. It came back real quick. So and here's the thing, you can't do anything. I have a lot of meetings, and very frankly, not a lot of people are aware yet of the drone situation. And I mean, I literally have to get out a map and what is there to talk about? I mean, you can't move. What can you do if you can't move? So I don't know that there's anything that's unaddressed. It's a small, community. It's going to be hanging on for dear life. Everybody needs the same thing: basic food, basic medicine, basic hygiene. You can't evacuate anybody. I don't. That's a tough question to answer because it doesn't get better until the security situation gets better.
Right on. Well, listen, man, I wanted to take a few minutes to take questions from the folks that are here. Just before we do that, before we go to questions from you guys, I do just want to thank the sponsor of tonight's live, which I'm going to get wrong. So I'm going to move Ballerina up to the head of the class because, of course, without Ballerina, I wouldn't be here. There's just no two ways about it. So everybody thank Ballerina when you see him. And then, of course, big thanks to the moderator team, Cheyenne, Vanetta, PT, Jay, and Travis. Big thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peters Peeps group on the Book of Faces, and to Lars, who's got the Discord server and the Alexievich archive. Thank you to Vanetta Larrett, who's got our Google Doc share, where you can get letters to Congress, the Senate, and the White House around Ukraine's needs. And if you have not yet made your voice heard, get that link from Vanetta there, or Vanetta chat it in for us when you have a chance. Oh, it's Monday. Vanetta's off now. Okay, sorry. All right, so Ben, the first question is, what can we do to help?
God bless you for that question. First of all, thank all of you. Thank you, Peter. Thank your listeners. Thank your sponsors. Thank all y'all for caring. You know, the single biggest thing here for the people in Kherson is just the knowledge that people care. These are people that feel left for dead, sold out. I mean, they just haven't been helped. It's such a dangerous place. The danger scares away the resources.
Are they principally elderly folks or disabled or everything?
Overwhelmingly, it's
overwhelmingly elderly who just had nowhere to go.
That's exactly
and no resources to get there.
Almost no kids here. Almost none. Yes. It's the folks that have no place else to go, overwhelmingly an elderly population. So, first of all, thanks for the care and concern. Basic food, basic hygiene, basic medicine, basic clothes. We get those things, or other people, get those things one of two ways. Either people give those things, to people like us, or they donate funds and, to purchase those things. That's the best way to that's the best way to help. Thank you for the question.
It's a good one. It's always the elderly and children that suffer most, says Walter Williamson. Who else? Anybody else have a question for our buddy Ben here while he's here? Are you able to purchase what you need? So are donations to the organization helpful because you have a supply chain, or are there particular items you can't get that you'd rather somebody boxed up and measted to you?
Thank you for the question. So we can buy things here, and with Western currency, it's a lot. It's cost effective to purchase things. Now the problem that we have now is, you got to risk your life to leave and come back, but we can do that. We can buy things here. That's cost effective. People that want to send things to us, Nova Posta is a great way. Nova Posta number 20, right around the corner. That's awesome. We'll pay the shipping if need be. That is how we get most of our stuff. But donations are very effective too. If you're not in Ukraine, it's very difficult to, the export-import nightmare is a nightmare. So donations are a very effective way, and we'd sure appreciate those. Accountability is a big thing. Everybody you deal with should not hesitate with that. So we always, we're going to take a picture of what we buy with your money. We're going to take a picture of the receipt, and we're going to take a picture of the people that get the stuff. And most times you're going to get a video because they want to tell you how thankful they are. And that's really important to us. For one, you deserve that. Number two, I want you to have the feeling of seeing the impact of what you do, because it has a way of propelling people forward. And I just think it's so that hopefully that answers the question, Peter. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I think that answers the question. I assume on the website you just put a credit card in and you can make a donation that way, right?
You can. We're a registered 501c3 in the United States, so people want to, if you happen to be in the United States and want your tax deduction, we can send you the paperwork for that. But yes, www.worldaidrunners.org, and folks can just reach out to me too on TikTok or whomever. People send money, PayPal, Venmo. Again, the focus is on helping, so whatever way is easiest.
So Walter Williamson has a great question. Are you aware of any chemical attacks in Kherson City?
I'm not. Now, that doesn't mean they haven't happened, and I'm not, is the short answer to that question. Now, one thing that I am aware of is the mining of the riverbank, and I'm not a chemist, but so maybe that's something different. But we're inching closer to those kind of things. So how do you mine the opposite side of a riverbank? Well, here we go again with technology. They send a shell over with these anti-personnel mines. and they scatter all over. And that is a big problem on the riverbank right now. So no chemical attacks, but we do have the mass mining of that riverbank, and there's people, it's fall, the leaves are falling. That's a disaster. I mean, you really can't go down there. Christina, who, if I'm allowed to do this, Christina's over here. Here's a survivor of the local, of the Russian. She's on our team, and you know, we do it with them, not for them. But Christina's grandmother lives down there, and you know, somebody was walking down there the other day, and the leaves cover up the mines. So no on the chemical attacks, but the mining stuff is really serious, and that just started about 10 days ago.
And as I understand it, the drone attacks on civilians really began in earnest like end of August and have just ramped up since.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And is there any protection from these things?
No, there's not.
You're out in the open. You're out in the open. You're a target.
Yes. Yes. I mean, there's really not. So it's a little crazy, but you go into the local cafes, and you know, back home, I guess there's kind of reading literature and whatnot. Not here. There's instructions on what to do if you are attacked by a drone. You know, I guess you got to say something, but running in a zigzag pattern is that's not going to work. You know,
it wouldn't work for me because I don't run.
Yeah, me too, right? You know, you have about a 1 second reaction time. So, you know, for our team, there are certain safe places. Now that means something different here in Kherson, but you know, the office is relatively safe. So if you hear one and you can get indoors behind, you know, 2 walls real quick, but that really limits your mobility. So no, there's really no defense to these. We had a woman, Anastasia, who was came to the free store last week, and she was 23 years old, and she was riding her bike. She was riding her bike because she thought if she was riding her bike, she was clearly a civilian, and clearly she was. Down on the riverbank, she's got 2 kids. A drone found her. I mean, she turned right. The drone goes right, turns left. It finally released the grenade. It rolled off of her shoulder down into the pedals and exploded. And she can't walk. She's obviously in bad shape, and you know, she's got 2 kids, and we were happy to help her, but obviously that's not an isolated incident. Back in January and February, especially down in the Parabezhnaya zona, these are people that don't get any. I mean, they just, you know, they don't have really any help. And our initial design was to really, you know, I mean, to focus on them. Not everybody can get to the free store. That last kilometer from the riverbank is really, really dangerous. And like you said, a lot of people are immobile. So, you know, a year ago, we would take the free store down there, very carefully orchestrated drops on the riverbank. People would be hiding behind a school for line of fire protection. We'd roll in, we'd do that, get out of there. That got too dangerous. I would spot, you know, just kind of myself, unmarked, just run in and run out, you know, local relationships. People know if I'm in a certain place, I got stuff in my trunk. That got too hot. Christina and I then began walking that Parabezhnaya zone. Now, at night, and in February and March, even then, there were surveillance drones all over that place. I mean, you could hear the hum, the buzz, but as long as we appeared as regular civilians, you know, that wasn't gonna be a problem. But you can't take a car in there. We would occasionally have some really scary experiences with drones, but they were occasional. The drones started more and more. They came, you know, not just on the river and on the riverbank, but more and more into the city. And so you had occasional troubling data, but that was hardly an everyday experience. And those weren't necessarily attack drones. Starting at some point towards the end of the summer, all of a sudden, in force, and you have the FPVs and they're holding the grenades, and all of a sudden the body count is off the charts. I mean, they're blowing up transport, blowing up this. Coincident with this, I should point this out. This is important. The Russians, they drop leaflets, and the Russian Telegram channels are, you have access to that. They declare a red zone. Now, I've been here, the whole time since the occupation, and what is this, a red zone? Well, this is the front half of the city, and what this means is that everything that's moving, every vehicle is a legitimate military target. Yeah, and every civilian. So it's not like they're holding their cards, and those things were coincident, and all of a sudden, that was just a real game changer.
I can't even imagine, man. I can't even imagine. Has your store been targeted by drone or hit by shelling, or have you come under attack?
I have not come under attack by a drone. Slava Bogle, thank goodness. Everything gets hit here by shelling. The apartment's been hit once. I don't know if I can show it to you right here, but I don't know if you can see that right there. Can you see that, Peter?
I don't think your camera never came on.
Oh, can you see me?
I don't think we have. No, I don't think we have your camera.
No. Let's see.
There you are.
Oh, man. Well, it goes
There you are,
downhill
pal.
from here. You can see my face.
Hey,
I'm sorry.
everybody, there's Ben.
I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. I'm
No
from
problem.
Kentucky.
I just assumed you didn't want it on. That's all.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not. This is Christina.
Hello.
Hey, Christina.
She's on our team and a survivor of the Russian occupation who chose to stay behind and help her people. And not just that, work with the Americans, who she calls the loveliest human targets in her song. So that's pretty brave of her. And I can, if you want to ask questions to Christina, I can try and translate. But anyway, I don't know if you can see this right here. Can you see that?
I see some broken glass, looks like.
All right. That's the only, that's
Was that just shrapnel from a shell or something?
right. So everything gets hit with shrapnel. Knock on wood, we have 100%.
What?
Everything, I'm declaring that a success, Peter. That's
Right on. Well, listen, Ben, we are out of time. I do really want to tell you how much I appreciate your efforts and you taking the time to talk to us. We appreciated hearing from you. It's important to hear from people on the ground. And I'll make a point of circling back to you so that more of the story of the Free Store can be told here. So everybody, if you would please thank Ben and Christina for their efforts on behalf of the people of Kherson and for their time this evening.
God bless you, Peter. God bless your listeners. Thank all of you for helping. It means so much to these people. That face says it all. It means everything. What you do makes a difference. Thank you.
Thanks, pal.
All right.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Guys, everybody, thank you all so much. Big thanks to the moderator team, of course. Thanks to our sponsor, Ballerina. Thanks, guys, for the Patreon, guys. Do me a favor, take a look at Patreon. There's a bunch of content that was posted this weekend that is specific just to you. So take a look. There's a bunch of Patreon content that I'm fairly proud of. So take a look at it, please. And Ben, I will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
That's my line. Guys, thanks for being there for me. Because you're there for me, I can be there for you. So make it a great day, everybody.